hopefully all of us can agree on one or two things. Is the definition of operational excellency. Why should we think and live on operational excellence? What do we mean by it, and why should we think about it? Why is it important to think about it? And the next bullet I wanted to put is this: how do you embed operational excellence in your DNA? Now, when I call the word DNA, and I'll come to you, what do I mean by it? And the last thing is, operational excellence is, if you start a firm, I mean, all of you guys have done a brilliant job under the leadership of Raj Kumar to build Rodic to the level where it is one of the leading firms of India in the space, and you want to continue to expand it and turn it into a global institution. So to get there, why OE and the thinking of OE and making OE embed in your DNA is absolutely critical. So, a lot of people create companies, but what I always say, creating companies is easy, but creating an institution is what the mindset is needed. So if you think about various great logos, call it Tata's or IBM or call it Sony, you become an institution, and institution starts to become more important. And that's the whole idea of operational excellence: is how do you take a group of individuals, an entity, and turn it into an institution which lasts much longer than individuals. And that's the whole idea, that unless and until you have OE embedded in your DNA, it's very difficult to become an institution. So these are the 4 bullets that I'll probably keep my, the whole area of discussion and focus around. Any questions? Anything anybody would like to add? Everybody on the call is equally experienced, so I just want to make sure that it remains a very mutually discussion-centric talk. If no questions, then I'll move ahead. But if anybody wants to add anything, happy to take a question here. So if not, let me move to the next slide. And all this deck I put together probably just in an hour based on my life's experience. So it's not coming out of any book. And at the end of the talk, I'm going to share this deck with Adarsh, and Adarsh, you can share it with the team if you like. But the whole idea was to synthesize my journey and my experience. And even though I have used technology as sort of the lever to push operational excellence in various industry contexts, but the idea was to kind of generalize it enough that you can use it in any industry context. So what is operational excellence? And if I simplify it in a very simple jargon, very simple definition, it is do the task one step better tomorrow than whatever you are doing today. And it applies to all functions. It's not necessarily just engineering centric or HR centric or marketing or sales or product definition, design, delivery, you name it. It basically applies to each and every supply chain that you might have. And one way to look at that, everything that an entity does is a connected or a series of steps. And if you, let's say, take for an example, HR has multiple processes underneath it. Each process you can almost think of as an HR supply chain. And the whole idea is that however your supply chain is put together today, how do you make it better tomorrow? And if you keep that mindset, then you already have started to think on operational efficiency and operational excellence side. The second bullet almost falls out of it is however you are executing a certain process today, how do you make it better tomorrow? Now, how do you make it? There are various elements that come into the play, and we will touch to those in the subsequent slide. But the idea is not to let things linger too long, however they are operating today, without disrupting it. Disruption becomes key element of whatever you are doing today, however is your process is getting executed, how do you improve on it tomorrow? Another way to look at it is how do you do smarter, better, and sustainably faster? Now, the operating word in that bullet becomes sustainable. So whatever you do has to be almost institutionalized. And whatever you institutionalize, you have to think about, can I make it sustainable? Because any process, if you do one-off, then it becomes like shooting from the hip. So you get a problem, you solve it that day. Another problem shows up next day, you solve it in a different way. The idea should be that whenever you solve a problem, can you extract the common elements out of it and create a standard process? Once you create a process, then you start to constantly think about how do I make it better? And when you are thinking about making it better, another element that you add into it, how do I make it sustainable?
Okay, okay, thank you.
So,
I'm
so if,
connected. Thank you very much.
so if you think on those lines, then it starts to sort of become institutionalization of a process. And then the last bullet, very important to think about operational excellence and operational efficiency, is how do you stay ahead of the impending change? Because if you think about the way we exist and live in life, and the whole life is about constant change. Now, whether you are changing things intentionally and on your own, or the market is going to change the things for you, or the regulatory environment is going to change the things for you, the economic environment is going to change the things for you, or the health, like what we are all dealing with these days. A shock is going to come in the form of a black swan event that none of us was expecting, and then you will have to accept the change. Now, the firms or entities that are built or geared towards constantly improving their operational processes or are moving towards an operational efficient environment, they respond to these shocks much better than the firms who are not geared towards sort of constantly fixing things or thinking in the time in terms of operational efficiency. So it's even more critical to be a firm that is willing to change things even without the external shocks, but on their own to lead the market rather than respond to the changes that are coming from outside. So in a nutshell, it's like either you make changes yourself or the world is going to force you to change. It's like, when you healthcare, all of us want to be fit. And so there are two ways to stay fit. Either you stay fit even before falling sick, or you will fall sick and then the doctor is going to tell you to exercise and cut down on fat or eat healthy or quit drinking or quit smoking. So there are two ways to look at it. Either you develop a lifestyle of which is fitness driven, you want to stay healthy because you don't want to fall sick. And the chances are that even if there is a impending crisis like what's going on with this whole COVID thing, you might be able to weather that storm much better than somebody who's unhealthy, who's unfit, and then the COVID bacteria hits or virus hit. They are going to be probably, come out a little bit more withered or even might end up, sort of in a hospital and in a bad situation. So the whole idea is that either you stay ahead of the change or the change is going to hit you anyways, and then you will be less prepared and you're going to probably take a bigger hit. And I just wanted to, sort of, emphasize this here that please take care of your health, take care of your fitness, absolutely critical, and don't wait for, the doctor telling you to do it, but stay ahead of it because you will end up performing much better even if you catch an infection than if you're not in good shape. Any questions, any comments? Anybody wants to add anything to it?
I am MP Sharma. There is a question.
Yes, sir.
Not a question, it is a thought, probably. You may hear your reaction.
No, absolutely. Would love to hear. Yeah.
You come to the previous slide.
Okay, did I hide it? There we go.
Yes, sir. Saying that to do the task one step better tomorrow across all functions. My take is that do not put off till tomorrow what you can do today.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So the whole idea, you're absolutely right. But I'm trying to weave into the story that if you constantly think of improving whatever you are doing today, that tomorrow you are going to do one bit better than what you're going today. So however you want to put it, totally agree with you. And if you weave all these things together, that you want to perform better, you want to be smarter about things, you want to make it sustainable. And then if you put all these together, then you will constantly be ahead of the change and you will be driving the change, not responding to change. And in life, like all of us, I'm sure, experienced enough, we have seen that if you are driving the change, you are in control of the change. But when you are reacting to the change or reacting to the shock from outside, then you are not in control of the change. Then you are reacting to the change. And it's good to be a proactive organization that's in control of the change and you want to control your destiny. Now, people will say that it's not true 100% of the time. And I totally agree with it, that you might be 70, 80, 90%, but at least you will be much better off than if you are totally reacting to it. Think of it this way. that there were a lot of organizations in the last 3-4 years who were already trying to push remote connectivity, work from home as much as you can, at least half the time, and so on and so forth. So when this whole COVID thing hit, the firms who had already rolled out these remote connectivity, remote communication platforms are probably doing a much better job now than if the firms were not already geared towards that culture of remote work environment. And that's where Sharma ji absolutely right, that all these things come better, that if you can improve on things as quickly as you can and make it part of your culture, you will end up doing a much better job.
Yeah, Manish, this is Samit. Like, you know, you have given the 4 bullets under operational efficiency. For me, it seems the nutshell is like it should be improvement for all the 4 bullets.
Yes.
If you say it's the improvement, keep improving on the things.
Exactly. I just wanted to give you various perspective of it, because in various industries, various companies, I've seen a lot of people, you know, approaching the same thing in various ways. I just wanted to give you what I call a holistic definition or approach of it, so it becomes more well-rounded version for sticking.
Thank you.
If you think from a Japanese perspective, they will latch on to bullet number 3, smarter, better, and sustainable. You know, so everybody looks at operational efficiency differently. I just wanted to give you a new perspective on it. Then the next one I wanted to hit is like, you know, why do we have to think of operational efficiency? Why do we have to think of operational excellence? And I think it falls off from our previous one, that either you drive the change or the impending change will wipe you out. And there are tons of examples of it. I mean, I'm sure all of us who read all sorts of literature, you must have come across these famous names: Xerox, Kodak, Blockbuster, that was, you know, video sharing, big firm in North America. Washington Mutual was a big bank. All of these mega corporations were as big as some of the biggest names that you have currently, and none of them you find exist anymore. And it's primarily because none of these firms were ready to, you know, sort of get onto that operational efficiency and excellence pedal. Xerox was one of the most phenomenal, what I call innovative firms that had come up with multitude of great, you know, copyrighted materials, the transistors, the lot of innovation that you see in computation came from Xerox Palo Alto lab, but they couldn't survive because they didn't know how to take it and roll it into their existing processes. They got wiped out by Apple and everybody else. Kodak, the film company, you know, the digital revolution came. They were not geared towards accepting the change that was going to come from outside. They got wiped out. Blockbuster got cleaned up by Netflix. Washington Mutual, 2008 financial crisis, got bought out by JP Morgan for $1 a share. And I was part of that whole transaction, so I can tell you from my personal experience. So all of these things are primarily because either you know, a lot of firms, a lot of entities get very comfortable when they're sitting at a certain position, and what they don't realize that nobody's position stays in one place for too long, and you've got to be constantly reinventing yourself. And you would hear this word innovation, reinvention, you know, re-engineering. They're all nothing but what I call various jargon that people coin, but they boil down to one simple formula, and the one simple term is operational efficiency. And the trigger for operational efficiency could be your internal way of improving your internal supply chains. And when I call internal supply chains, it could be HR, sales, marketing, design, and so on and so forth. Or another way to look at the trigger could be an external innovation coming up from outside, like the Zoom and the Teams, and how do you integrate them into your supply chain? The trigger could be change in the regulatory environment, but you will be able to react to those triggers if you are geared towards that. Even if there is no trigger, you are triggering the change from inside constantly. So the idea of never ever letting go of your operational efficiency, even when there is no shock from outside or there is no trigger from outside, the firm that kind of starts to live that lifestyle, they always are able to come out of these shocks much better than the firms that don't react to it. And if you think about the next bullet, I put the title relevance there. And the whole idea of relevance is that no matter what shock is hitting you and your firm, that you are able to reinvent yourself to constantly stay relevant to the society, to your value chains, to your customers. So if you think about IBM from the 40s, they have seen cycles of up and down, but they have been constantly either able to drive the change or they react to the change, but they have stayed relevant. So even, and you would hear in the IBM product categories that they're never number 3 in any product category. They stay number 1 or 2, or they siphon off if they fall from 2, and they redeploy the capital to again create a product that is in number 1 or number 2 range. Same is true with Sony. And I'm just throwing these examples here since we just have 1 hour. Otherwise, there can be a case study for hours that we can discuss. But I just want to leave you with tons of these thoughts that if you start to double click on these, why some of these firms have been able to exist for hundreds of years, if not hundreds, at least 50, 60, 70, 80 years, is because of their either ability, or call it their DNA, or call it their attitude. Those 3 things combined together help them to reshape them internally, even without a shock coming from outside in any of the various attributes. Could be economic, health, financial, and so on and so forth. So I just picked up some examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but just wanted to give you examples from hardware, from technology, from software, from consulting, from product, from banking, and so on and so forth. And I've added the name Rodic there. So hopefully, you have, the firm is in operation for close to about 20 years. That's a long time. Now, the firm is in a perfect place where you have to start to create a plan that you want to become an institution which is relevant to these other logos for the next 50 to 100 years. And you might not know what the products are going to be in 50 years, what the environment or society is going to be in the 100 years, but you want to inculcate the DNA in the firm that the firm stays relevant no matter what the context is going to be in 50 or 40 years. So operational efficiency for Rodic starts to mean something very, very different. What it starts to mean that how do you create the DNA and the mindset that thrives in change, whether the change is internally driven or externally driven. And any firm that loves to thrive in the change, that loves to create a little bit of a chaos in itself and able to excel in that chaos, those are the firms that become institutions after a while. If the firm becomes too rigid, doesn't like chaos, too much of standard operating procedures, nobody's questioning anybody, then you will start to see that a rigid firm doesn't sort of live very well from one shock to the other. And I think it's the DNA thing, and I'll talk about some of these things in the subsequent slide. But the idea is to stay flexible, nimble, create what I call managed chaos internally in the firm, and let leadership and the processes thrive in that managed chaos. And if you can inculcate the DNA, then whether the shock is from outside or inside, you will see that the leadership, the attitude, the processes, the platforms, everything will become geared towards constantly reinventing itself. And constant reinvention of itself is what operational efficiency and operational excellence is, in my experience of life. And the last bullet, very simple, to not only survive, but thrive in the change. That becomes another very important, So I always take this example that all of us love great athletes, be it, Virat Kohli in cricket these days, or Roger Federer in tennis, and some other greats. You would see that some of the best athletes, they really perform better when they're under pressure or when the chips are on the line, And you want to create that attitude in the firm as well. So whenever there is a change happening, whenever there is a massive disruption happening, you go into the disruption with the attitude that we are going to come out stronger on the other side when things stabilize. So you start to enjoy volatility. You start to enjoy disruption. You start to almost crave for the chaos. And to get to that point of, what I call become part of your DNA, it's very, very important to become an institution. The rigid firms usually don't do very well. So stay nimble and flexible and love the change. Thrive in the change.
I would like to add something to the relevance part of it that you brought up. I have worked for small, medium, and large companies. From what I see, you are putting Rodic in the relevance thing is good because that motivates the company itself to move forward towards to becoming an institution. But the most important thing that I wanted to, from my experience, I want to tell you is, right now, as you said, Rodic is sitting at the medium company and moving towards this institution. It has to grow a lot more. But looking between 2020 and 2030, the way things are changing in our highway and roadway engineering is going to be entirely different because considering the pollution part of it, the infrastructures will not remain the same as we are putting concrete and walking away with it or the asphalt on the road. It has to have infrastructure to able to have electrical vehicles traveling on these roads. And it needs different infrastructure. Sustainability is required there. And the new way of designing has to be done. So we need to move into much more the parts of the AutoCAD drawings and BIM and everything in a much bigger way so that we can show the entire picture of a 20-kilometer roadway, what we expect to give them as a new thing rather than the traditional way of doing things. So that's where how we move to become an institution that pioneered the way of building new infrastructures and new structures where all the new elements that may come between 2020 and 2030 are being looked into very carefully. So, and the solar energy and everything. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think all those elements and triggers, if you just develop the mindset that we want to be number one in everything or at the most number two, and we are never going to fall below number two. As soon as you develop that mindset, you are going to adopt all these best practices, the best design, the best, sustainable architecture for the roads and whatnot. You will start to integrate those things proactively even before your clients are asking for it. And the idea is then that it comes to that you want to stay ahead of the curve and drive the change in the society and your industry context. And I'll give you one example here. I used to be with IBM in the 90s. And if I'm sure many of us were already working at that time, all people would have started to see the advertisement in the airports, what it used to be called as e-business. That IBM started that campaign 4 years ahead before people would know what e-business is all about. Even before Amazon was founded, that IBM ads start to show up in 96, 97 time frame. And then e-business became the thing that everybody caught onto it in 99, 2000 time frame. Then if you think about the whole cloud thing, it came out of IBM Research Labs, and IBM started to advertise about cloud, I think about 6 years ago, when people didn't even know how the accounting for the cloud part is going to happen. And this is what I call pushing the change. So from their IBM labs, they were able to know where the world of technology is heading. They would start to see the technology roadmap into the minds of people and start to drive the change in the market and the back of it. And that's the strategy that IBM has followed for the last 60, 70 years, where they create the market. So there is one thing that you want to operate in the market and you want to be successful in the market. But what you want to be and what Rodic can do, after spending time with Rajkumar and the team for the last 6, 7 months, where you are in the leading position, now you have to take the mental off that I want to create the new markets, not just play in the market. And to create a market, it requires this sort of thinking, what, Murthy sir, you were talking about, that you need to think about 10 to 15 years ahead. You need to think about how the society will be in the 10 to 15 years, what the infrastructure requirements of the society is going to be, how the new products, whether it's the automobile part or the interconnectivity of the cities and the highways and airports, how the smart city environment will look like in 10 to 15 years. And Rodic should start to create that market by socializing with the stakeholders, be in the government side or the private sector side. And that does require, sort of thinking a little bit ahead of the curve, look at the tools and the processes that you will need to create that market. Because operating in a market, reacting in a market is slightly different than creating a market. But taking a baby step towards it, the journey can be accomplished. And that's a hallmark of an institution. You are not only a leader, but you are creating a context, creating a market. And once you develop that mindset, that's when you know that's when, if you think about IBM predicts its 5 years worth of revenue and margins to the Wall Street. Now, even if they miss, Wall Street already knows where they're going to make up. So on the rolling basis, they forecast their margins. GE does that. But to be able to do it, you have to have that strength and sort of what I call mental agility and the confidence in your team that you will be able to create markets and recover your profits and your top line numbers out of it. Sorry if that was a long diatribe, but you hit a very good point, Murthy sir. So I just wanted to kind of.
I just want to add one element. Most people may not know that you brought about IBM. IBM started almost 10 years back, believe it or not. They went into the smart city doing completely in China and other parts of the world. They have got a transportation division by themselves. So they not only they were simply IBM when we think about it, but they did branch out to the transportation. I have discussed many times with their staff over there with regard to smart cities they developed. I mean, China did not become immediately something like that. It was through this process that IBM took them and made them great today with the AI and everything. So just want to add that.
Absolutely. So just wanted to put this bigger context here. Any more thoughts, ideas, comments?
Yes, thank you so much.
To hear from you all.
To strengthen your point, the third point in the slide that survive, not only survive but thrive in change. That is one example I may cite as far as Rodic is concerned, which you have put in the category of relevance, which is correct thing.
Right.
Before this lockdown start, we have been discussing working from home because of the increased number of employees and shortage of staff. And we are not able to find the gap, how to proceed and what step we should take in the beginning. Ultimately, this lockdown started and we were compelled to work from home. And this software which we are using now, it was available, but very limited way it was used. Now the entire company is connected with this software and we are discussing or making our programs and meetings on this program daily. And this is the one action which I feel is a very good step, that we accepted this change and we use the Microsoft software. And now we realize that if need be, we can work from home without any interruption.
Absolutely. And now just to take this point a little forward, if you think about, and I think this will help us to move into the how section as well, that now this change has been triggered, right? And this change has been triggered and you have gotten into working remotely using this platform. My request would be, don't just stop there now. Now, whatever the impact of this trigger has been, now double click on each one of your subsequent processes, be it HR, marketing, sales, delivery, and see how this change you can use to optimize and create efficiencies across all of those supply chains. And that is the beauty of what I call that once as a process has been disrupted, then don't just stop by looking at one node. How do you roll it across the supply chain? That will really give you the bigger bang for the buck for the investment in this software.
That's right.
And that's the how part, that the technical part. If we are in a room and whiteboarding, I can sort of work with you to make that happen. But you get the point. The idea is not to stop here. Continue to double click on your subsequent supply chain elements across various functions and bring that efficiency out that has been triggered with remote working.
I can give a simple example that can be adopted by immediately after this thing is over is, for example, CAD people. We give them drawings to do.
Yeah.
Instead of just asking us to either come down to the first floor, or they coming down to the fourth floor, or I am on sick leave, they can just contact me through this and show me the drawing here, and I can say whether it is right or wrong. That job is done. They don't have to wait for me to come next day.
And one of the best things in Teams is that there is a document repository. So people can upload the documents and it's visible to everybody. And you can control who sees what document based on various access and whatnot. So there's a huge amount of what I call technology-driven disruption that you have already taken the first step, and then you can roll it across your entire processes across various functions. And it will yield tremendous amount of productivity, benefits to the firm.
Yes, and same with the letters or anything. Even letters, sometimes just for one sentence, this morning I had a letter to be written to the contractor. I didn't use the word deployment. I said on site. So the person wrote back to me saying we should write the word deployment. I said fine with it. That same thing could have been done with each of us talking on the Microsoft time and he showing it to me. Can I change this? End of story. Send the letter.
Yeah.
So.
Sir,
Phenomenal.
KD Singh, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir,
Hello.
Sir, it's KD Singh, sir.
Hello, KD. How are you, sir?
Sir, fine, sir. Sir, in addition to this survive and thrive, we are working from home. We are not only working from home, we are taking our health combinedly. We are learning, taking training. We are getting a lot of motivationals from you and other speakers. So thanks to Corona, we are getting more time utilization, while other construction company and other consultant company who I know, they are killing time by watching TV. While we are utilizing much more time than regular, and you see that about 140% is joining together, and hope we will more than 50% of our strength in some few days, sir.
Well, that's why you're Rodic. You have the Rodic DNA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You have to be proud of that aspect. Now, how do you do it?
Sir, this is Shafqat here from Jammu. May I make a point over here? Shafqat
yes, sir,
from Jammu.
please. Yes, sir.
So we're just listening to you about this Microsoft Teams and how you can do document sharing. At this point, I mean, Rajkumar sir is also here and Mr. Narasimhamurthy is also here. Sir, if you remember, Mr. Narasimhamurthy, when you were here, we talked about a knowledge management repository that we have. Now, we already have a SharePoint portal. And I've been, trying to push everyone to whatever documents you have, whatever documents we are working on, we should put it on the portal, on the SharePoint portal. I mean, you have a terabyte of space, everyone. Now,
yes.
The point is, I mean, if say I lose my laptop or it falls and it breaks, the entire knowledge that I have is on my laptop. Now that is one point. So that gets so a laptop is worth 35,000, 40,000 rupees, but the knowledge is worth millions on it. Now the other point is, when people leave an organization, knowledge also goes with them. This way we can at least retain our knowledge. So I've been advocating and this thing, and I'm doing that myself. I've got some other people also to do it. I've taken some documents of yes, sir.
No, what you're saying is absolutely right. Yeah, that's what I was alluding earlier, that now that you have already adopted this remote working sort of operational mechanism, and you have the Teams and you have the SharePoint, just by rolling out the product or tool is not enough. Now you need to take the productivity that these tools bring and integrate in all your subsequent supply chain. So you referred to knowledge management. Same thing should be thought through about the HR processes, should be thought about sales, marketing, delivery, reporting, time management. You need to think about what are the productivity elements that these tools bring and how do you integrate them into your supply chains. And once you start to do it, the investments in these tools, you will recover in productivity curves within like 2 or 3 months. So and most of the companies, the mistake that they make, that they buy a tool for doing just one thing and they stop there. But good and smart firms, they look at that, okay, I've already made an investment in a tool. This tool has these benefits and productivities. Now, how do I take it and roll it out across the firm, across the processes? And that's where your, what I call leverage, you invest $100, but recover 10,000 out of it. And if you don't have that attitude, then you'll invest $100 and you'll only recover 300 out of it. And the firms who do, so the whole game in the life is leveraging. The firms that learn to leverage their dollar investment much farther are the ones that become institutions. And firms who fall short are the ones who get disrupted along the way. So there are various ways to skin this cat, but the idea all of you guys are bringing is absolutely the same, that these tools are already giving you ideas what else can be done with these. Now you have to make it a sort of a sustainable institutional way of rolling out these changes across the firm. And there are various ways to do it, and I'm going to touch on some of them. But I'm glad that it's triggering a lot of thoughts in your head. That's the whole idea of the discussion. And a good call, both SharePoint and Teams is based on Microsoft platform, so they can be very easily integrated about the knowledge management I'm referring to. And you would see that even if you have your documents on SharePoint, and if you're discussing something with somebody in Teams, you can easily pull those documents, look at the laptop. Somebody could be sitting in Jammu, somebody could be sitting in Calcutta, and you could all be reviewing the same drawings at the same time and making changes along the way. So the productivity that these two things bring together, and if you roll it out across the firm and integrate well in your processes, could be huge. And you have to do it if you want to grow and scale and build a mega firm, which is phenomenally successful across the globe, becomes key. Any more ideas, thoughts? Please do share. The next is I wanted to, so how do you do it? How do you bring the operational efficiency attitude? My number one bullet, if you see up there, sorry, it's my dog who's barking on something, is about leadership. It's very, very critical that your top leadership, like all of you guys who are here, and from the top, the attitude should be that you want to be better and best in whatever you are doing. I have worked in mega transformation projects. I've led huge conglomerations through the changes and transformations. The transformations that have been successful, the changes that have been successful are always with the firms and the teams where the leader is driving it. And leader has totally bought into it, and it's the leadership's attitude that matters the most. If the leader is just doing it because they have to do it, it's just somebody's call, but he's not bought into it, then these the whole idea of operational efficiencies and transformation usually falls short. So it's absolutely critical to have the people in leadership position who love change, who drive change, who question status quo. And that's the next bullet on the status quo, that a lot of people feel, and I think it's a human tendency that we all get comfortable in a certain way of doing.
Manish,
yes, sir.
I'll just interrupt you. Rajpa side, I'll just interrupt you. Leadership here, Manish I am just addressing to my team. Leadership here, what Manish means is leadership at every level. Not only the CMD is the leader. Every vertical head, every unit head, broken down to the last guy. The guy who is responsible to look at a guest house also, the main guy over there, he's also a leader for that particular function.
Yeah.
Yes. That is my understanding. Manish.
My definition of leader is that if you have even one person reporting into you, you are as important of a leader as a CMD. The only difference that is that somebody has one person reporting into him, somebody has 1,000, but it's the matter of zeros. But the attitude of leadership has to be the same, absolutely in line. And then the status quo part becomes very, very important because it's a human tendency that we get used to a certain routine. We get used to a certain lifestyle. And I'm speaking from my own experience, and I'm sure all of us have it, that we get used to, liking certain kind of clothes, sleeping in a certain way, eating certain food, living in a certain way. And what happens is that same attitude starts to roll into your professional life as well. So I have seen it in my 27 years of professional life, that companies will roll out a certain process, a certain tool, and you go to the same place after 5 years, and you'll find that the company is still executing the same process in exactly the same way what it was 5 years ago. So what it's showing is that the world has changed in 5 years, but you haven't innovated yourself or re-Christianed yourself in 5 years. So what either you stay ahead of time, or you stay lockstep with time. But if you freeze in time, then you're falling behind the time. So it's very important that you develop this attitude in leadership that, let's say, your hiring process in your firm was operating in a certain way, let's say 2 years ago. But in the last 2 years, there have been plethora of new platforms and tools and new way of hiring that has come in. And if you're still hiring the same way, chances are you are probably not picking up the best of the talent, or your, hiring cycle is longer, or, all those, things will start to creep into your process. So whenever you have a process or way of doing things that has been the same, in the olden times, the metrics was 3 years. But now I will bring it down to, let's say, 9 months to 12 months. A leader should, what I call, audit the processes and say, guys, are we doing the things the same way what we were doing 1st January 2019? And if the answer is yes, then either somebody hasn't looked into what is happening in the market, somebody hasn't looked into what the startups are doing, somebody hasn't looked into how processes have changed, either in the industry, either in your own industry or in the other industry. It doesn't matter. But you have to question status quo across the board at a certain duration. And that attitude becomes very critical for triggering the change without getting force from outside. And that's what I meant by no status quo, and would love to, seek the comments from everyone, because it's very, very critical that this leadership team who's on this call, whether they are horizontal functional leaders or vertical functional leaders, or, team leaders in various sites and whatnot, without becoming a slave of a process, how do you stay master of a process? You stay master of the process because you can change the process. And I call a lot of people become slave of the process because, hey, this thing was done this way, so I'll continue to do it this way. You don't want to be a slave of a process. You want to stay master of the process. And that will only happen if you question status quo. If you don't question status quo, you'll end up becoming a slave of the process. And then it becomes difficult to have that culture of driving change, driving efficiency, and becoming operationally efficient. Any comments? Rajkumar, Sharma sir, Murthy sir, KD, anybody else? I'm sorry if I've missed somebody's name, but this is very, very important.
I would like to have comments from other leaders in the organization. I can go on and on. We, the senior guys, can go on. But let the more, it is important to have their comments, have their connect, and get their thought processes on the line. What Manish is talking about, the status quo and the change. It's very, very extremely important in the fast changing environment of today, the businesses, the way it is being run and the way disruptions are coming in. I would like to get some views from the younger guys, I guess.
Hello, good morning, sir. This is Rajesh. Sir,
hey, Rajesh. Yeah.
Sir, what I understand is that operational efficiency may be nothing but a continual improvement in the working style just to counter the changes which may happen in the future.
Exactly.
For the survival. For the survival. So what the major tools which we can take? First is our attitudes. Second is our learning. And third is our adaptability, or you can say sensitivity towards the changes. So this all makes us more productive and what you say this one efficiency in regarding this operational.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to be better at doing things, every day. Get better at it.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, sir.
And the next bullet, drive change. Don't wait for change. So one thing, Rajesh, what you just said, just before, so that you don't wait for the change. The idea is, it's like so I'm a fitness fanatic, just like Rajkumar. So I do, exercise in the morning. I go to gym. These days, gyms are closed, so I'm doing sit-ups and push-ups at home. But the idea is that you don't wait for your body to break down before you will start to exercise. You constantly exercise every day because you don't want your body to break down. That's a very, very important point, that you drive the change. You don't wait for the change and react to it. That is the key element that I was talking earlier also. The attitude of saying that I'll only do things when somebody will tell me to do. You don't want that attitude. You don't want the attitude that I will only change when my client will ask me to do things differently. No, you want to be proactive and go in front of the client and tell, this is how you should do it. Clients always respect consultants who are telling them how they can be a better client. I have been in consulting for 25 years. One of my the best clients I've had, the relationships that have lasted and have been very profitable are the ones where client feels that I have a consulting partner who tells me to become a better client. There are a lot of consulting firms who fail are the ones because they just do what the client tells them to do. Now, this is an art and a science. You don't want to go too far ahead as well, but just far enough that client feels compelled to come to you because you are a better advisor, you're a better executioner, you have the latest and the greatest, you understand their context, and you're able to bring the best of the thinking so they become a better customer for tomorrow. And in consulting parlance, it's a very, very important trick to learn, or what I call an attribute to learn. And that will only happen if you're changing continuously. You're driving the change. You're not reacting. If a client tells you that, hey, Mr. Tyagi, how about this? Then you have already lost the plot. So you should be telling the client that here are the 5 options. This is what I recommend because I understand what you are thinking about or what you should be doing. And the client should say, oh, yes, this is it, because you know their context. You're able to handhold them towards becoming a better client or being more successful. And that's where, Murthy sir and everybody else who was talking about the knowledge management, was talking about the CAD, CAM and all those things, 2030 and all those ideas becomes very, 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 very integrated into this thinking.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning. I'm Chitanjan Singh. I just want to add my experience with you. We are generally working between 3 C's: client, consultant, and contractor. Mm-hmm. The development of technology, if it only happens once the consultant will not give a good delivery, because let us say the client still insists that I should have a hard copy for anything. Though we are discussing, we can refer this discussion also, we can refer the soft copy also, but still the client is not habitual of getting getting through or taking approval on a soft copy. Similarly, the contractor. One out of the 3 C's, once he develops, it will not give from the decision to delivery. So, in my opinion, all the 3 C's have to develop. The way if only the consultant develop, it will not function. This is just I wanted to know what is your opinion.
No. I totally get it. So if you think about supply chains, right? So I'm referring to, so you have your firm's internal supply chains, and then your internal supply chains are integrated into your client supply chain, and your client supply chain is integrated into your whoever is your deployment partner is, could be L&T or whoever. So if you think about within your own supply chains, let's say your metrics is 100%. So at least you have improved the 30% of the overall supply chain. Then slowly you will start to push the change into your client supply chain, slowly start to push the change into your clients to consultant supply chain or deployment partner supply chain. So if you can improve your own internal efficiency, let's say within 3 months, this is just an example, right? So might not be realistic. But then your overall supply chain will improve in probably a year, but you are driving the change in the overall supply chain. Think about if your deployment partner is more ahead of you on the change curve and he's pushing the change in your throat, that will be more painful. So I totally get it that not the entire industry supply chain will be in lockstep with you. And no supply chain ever is in lockstep from starting point to the end point. But whatever is in your control, you want to be ahead on those change elements. Whatever is not in your control, you can influence. And what that does is buy you what I call industry reputation, that Rodic thinks ahead of the time. Even if the productivity of rest of the partners is not flowing into you right away, they will eventually start to accrue to you. So if you look into my earlier example I gave you about the e-business campaign of IBM, the cloud campaign of IBM, they started these campaigns even before the industry knew what the cloud is, what the industry knew what e-business is. But the accrual, when the industry caught up to it, IBM kept reaping the rewards for it. And that's where you want to be. You want to set the markers for the overall industry supply chain. You will only be able to do it when your own internal supply chain is ahead of the curve.
That's correct. That's correct. Right. Okay. Right? Thank you. Okay.
So hopefully I wasn't blabbering. Hopefully you are keeping pace with
right.
me.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
May I add something to it? My name is Raj Shahiran.
Yes, sir.
Probably the oldest in the group. I just want to add a couple of points. One is that we have forgotten the meaning of the word consultant. You consult someone only when you are confident that that person knows a little more than you. So yes, we need to be worthy of that word consultant.
Yes.
One. Number two is learning is a process. You never stop.
Yes.
And you should never stop. We have to think, eat, and sleep our project to be a good consultant. Now, yes, once all of us, when I say all, I mean my colleagues in Rodic, when we start doing this, then we certainly shall be one step ahead of all other consultants. Thank you.
Totally agree with you, Raj Shekharan, sir. And that's why the word I put continuously under drive change, don't wait for change, continuously. And to your point, the learnings, you always have to stay one step ahead of the industry, of the context, of the society, to earn the tag of consultant. In fact, we start to use the word advisors. All our partners, at senior level, we call everybody advisor or a partner, because people come to you because they know you know something more than what they do. So absolutely echo your point, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the next bullet, I mean, I'll take the leaf out of your comment. It's a journey without goal. So as you said, learning is a lifelong process. And what you will see is it applies to firm as well, to the company as well, to the institution as well, that nobody can ever say that we have reached the pinnacle of operational excellence. We have reached the high point of, operational efficiency. No, because there is no end to it. Rodic started 20 years ago. You have completed a 20-year journey. But if you want to remain an institution, you have reached this far because you have constantly innovated, you have constantly stayed ahead, you have scaled, you have delivered value, and you have to continue to deliver it year after year, decades after decades. So there is no end to this journey. And that's why I call it has to become part of your DNA. And there are only markers along the way. There is no end point to it. And the markers that I have used as a 4 pillars, that if you develop an attitude of measuring 4 things, and we can double click on it: your revenues, your margins, your employee satisfaction, and your customer satisfaction. If any process, whether in your horizontal organization or vertical organization, if you can't find the correlation of these 4 markers to that process and the improvement that you are rolling out in those processes, then you are missing something. Either you haven't thought through the process well, or you haven't found the right linkages with these 4 key pillars of measuring a success of a firm. And if you can start to do it, then you would see that these 4 markers, revenue, margins, employee sat, and customer sat, as the leadership starts to focus on these 4 things like a hawk's eye, then driving the change, accepting the change, and constantly be better starts to become inherent, what I call the integrated element of your DNA, or the way you execute in the firm. So these four things, every senior executive who's a P&L in charge should know these numbers by the heart, even at 2 a.m. in the night. And how do you do it? How do you then drive the change by tagging everything to these four important markers becomes very, very critical. Comments, thoughts?
Yeah,
even
I have one comment on this.
Sure.
Manish, I'll just broadly, generally, we all talk about preliminarily at number of occasions we talk about revenue and the margin, top line and the bottom line, at the top management. Then, if there are four things that you have put in: revenue, margins, employer satisfaction, and the customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
Broadly, it is the revenue that is talked at maybe 90% of the individuals in the organization, 90 plus. Margins would be the thing that would be talked by, say, 30%, 20% maybe. And employee satisfaction would be talked by maybe less than 10%. And customer satisfaction by less than 2% in the organization. And this is now, I have been talking about these things in different forums, but today I am realizing what is the impact is getting more when you have put in this deck and we are talking on it. The employee satisfaction and the customer satisfaction, and when we are driving, we are all now hooked up to this speech today. These things are equally important for the revenue and the margins that we are talking of.
Absolutely.
Where the 80% or the 90% of our workforce is talking of. Yes. From the other side, if we take it, if your customer is satisfied, and that will only come when your employees are satisfied. And if these two things are happening, you forget about the revenue and the margin. That will be taken care of.
Exactly.
By the head side.
I would just like to add that, the Virgin Atlantic Airlines, the guy, he said it very clearly, from the very beginning. You take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. Very simple. And the same thing goes with Steve Jobs, if you think about what he said. You hire the best, leave them to do their job.
Yeah.
So I think both of them have given a fundamental thing that anybody who runs particularly a consulting business, should
and I've
vouch
seen that
for that.
Even in non-consulting business these days, because if you and I think Rajkumar and I were talking about it 5-6 months ago and on and off when we were on various things. If anything that you do as a leader, you have to become so good at being able to find a correlation with these four elements on the fly. I had a very good leader that mentored me way back in IBM, who used to tell me that every conversation you have, Manish, is either your stock price goes up or your stock price goes down. And I've taken it to my heart. It's the same thing with your customers, with your employees. Everything that you do, if you know how these four pillars are going to get impacted, you become extremely efficient as a firm. And you can't ignore either of them, because they are all four are so tightly correlated that your success, how you take care of your employees, it doesn't mean you just give the freebies, but how you measure, how you give them the environment to be productive. Because in consulting, our product is our brains, the expertise that you bring and the expertise that you let people build on, and then you roll that expertise out as a product to your customer. So you create that environment where employees love to thrive in an innovative, disruptive, creative environment. They automatically will become good advisors to the customers. If they become good advisor to customer, then you don't have to sell. Your sale and your closing of the sale will automatically go up. So I have subsequent slides about metrics and all those things, but I think all of you guys are appreciating that these four pillars are so critical, and you have to be very good at finding everything that a firm does, how it impacts these four. And then if you can fine tune the correlation between these four and constantly calibrate to make this correlation tighter and efficient, you automatically will become a very large successful firm. And it takes bringing the leaders together and sort of driving this sort of thinking, and you will see that you will start to become successful. No process in a firm is rolled out that does not impact one of these four. And if you do sort of take a step back and think about it, you'll find that absolutely everything from the moment you open the front door and enter into the firm, anything that anybody does impacts one of these four things. Any more ideas, comments, thoughts? I think there are a few more slides. If you guys have time, I can continue. Otherwise, we can set up another call. Whatever you want me to do. I'm pretty happy and awake, so I can keep going. Rajkumar,
let's continue. Have time, I guess.
Yeah, let's continue. Chaliye. So let me go to the next step. And I'm talking in a very sort of, I haven't gone into the technicalities of individual supply chain, but I wanted to build the story and the context and the what I call the bubble around. So you start to think holistically from top down. And then there will come a time when you will have to double click on each supply chain, each process, and then find a way. So let me give you a quick sort of primer on where to start to think about it. My first hunch of when I'm talking to my large clients is the same thing here. Think across the functions. Don't just think that I just want to focus on sales or marketing on the other, because one of the things about a firm is the firm is like a body where if you have a pain in your toe, the whole body will still feel it, right? Or if you have a pain in your pinky, your rest of the body will be dysfunctional. So whenever you are thinking of change, whenever you're thinking of innovation, when you're thinking of re-engineering or rolling out anything, don't leave any function out, because each and every function impacts those four pillars. So think across the functions. Second thing you might want to do, if you haven't done it, is map functions and processes to revenue, margins, and satisfaction scores. And if you haven't done it in the beginning, it might feel a little bit of, why are we doing this exercise, or what is it going to lead to? You might not see the results immediately, but in the long term, it's going to be very, very critical to do it. And we can have subsequent discussion, and I can show the ways how to do it, or we can talk about it. The third bullet, very, very critical for the leadership team, that you have to constantly, and this is to the earlier point, the constantly and continuously identify areas to improve. So if you ask a leader, let's say your guest house in charge, Rajkumar, what you were referring to, and you say that, hey, Mr. So-and-so, tomorrow, can you tell me 20 things that you can do better in your guest house? If he says, no, everything is perfect, then you know that the guy hasn't because in every function constantly you have to have a top 20 list that you want to tackle. And if you don't have a top 20 list, okay, if you don't have a 20, at least 15 list, then you know that the leader is thinking about making things better. So it's very, very important that in all your supply chains, so even if I take a particular example, let's say these teams, right? So if you ask the functional leaders of sales, marketing, delivery, product, HR, operations, finance, and IT, and say, hey guys, within your own supply chain, come back to me and say how the teams can improve your systems or processes better tomorrow. What are the 20 things that you would like to do? Or what are the 10 things that you would think you can change once you fully know what the capabilities of teams are? That's what I meant by this. So the teams has become a trigger to force the change in your supply chain, and your leadership team has to figure out that in my area of responsibility, let's say finance, how can I integrate team to improve my finance function? And of course, you will have to first educate him about the capabilities of the product. So that's what I meant by having a top 20 list. So that is one trigger. The another trigger could be, let's say Rajkumar tomorrow tells that, hey, next year we want to grow 30%. So how would sales function has to change, marketing, delivery, product, HR, what all changes you have to figure out to be able to grow 30%? That could be another trigger. The subsequent trigger, let's say when your market size is not improving, but you want to improve the margins. If Rajkumar says, hey, instead of 28%, I want to do 35% next year, that becomes your trigger of change across your supply chains. So that's what I meant, that Even if the market is not forcing the triggers on you, you need to come up with your own triggers to have a top 20 list for improvement in each one of those areas. Extremely, extremely critical. It's like an athlete who's, sort of training for Olympics. He never sits on a laurel to say, hey, I'm doing 100 push-ups and I'm going to stop at 100. So he wants to move to 200. So he will go from 100 to 120 to 140, 160, and 180. And that's the attitude you want to bring. And I think there is a line I use somewhere that you become a marathoner, but you learn to run like a 100-meter sprinter. And that's what I meant by this top 20 list. Ask me questions, but because I've condensed a lot of material in just one bullet, but just wanted to give you a snapshot of it. The second thing, when you are thinking about bringing this change culture, as you are identifying your top 20 list, you are looking at functions, you always want to look at what are my bottlenecks of not accomplishing certain things. So you create a list of dependencies on the side, constraints, at least list them if you are aware of them. So tomorrow, if somebody says, I want to create my guest house like a Taj hotel, but there are going to be certain constraints, right? Could it be money? Could it be timeline? Could it be location and whatnot? So when somebody is giving you a wish list, just asking them to list bottlenecks and constraints sort of helps them to double click on their thinking and not just throw a thing and walk away. So it forces people to think through what they're doing, what they're asking for, because I have seen a lot of people who will just give you a top 20 list without thinking about what they're putting in the list. So when you force them to do these things, you make them a better thinker about what they're looking for, what they're asking for, what they will be moving towards. Because at some point in time, they have to become owner of that change, owner of that process. And then the last bullet, of course, any change, you have to map it to either revenue, margins, or SAT scores, either for the employee SAT or a customer SAT. So that is just a starting sort of a framework of thinking, if I wanted to put it, based on my experience of being in the industry for so long, doing these things. Just wanted to give you a framework of thinking to say, okay, it's good to drive change, it's good to push for change, but where to start? I just wanted to give you a broad framework to think about. Make sense? Any ideas, thoughts, suggestions?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Number 7, the next slide is how to start operational efficiency thinking. So the previous one was where to start, but the second part is how do you, okay, I know where to start, but how do you start to think? The very first thing that comes to mind is question everything. It's almost like if you're a process owner, it's like, how do I improve my value proposition? And you want to keep that attitude at all times, whether you're forming the list, whether you're putting the constraints, whether you're putting the bottlenecks, you need to question everything. And in our culture, and I'm going to be very honest, and I'm an Indian like all of you guys, but I have worked in every continent except Arctica and Antarctic. Every culture looks at this thing a little differently. Some cultures, they don't like questioning, or a guy below can't question the boss. Some cultures are very horizontal, where everybody can question everybody. And some culture, even if they don't like hierarchical questioning, they find a way to get the doubts out of people. So you need to understand how we operate in India, how the firm operates, what your culture is. But the element of questioning status quo, and to improve a value proposition, you have to find a way to what I call encourage it. And I'll leave it up to you, but you can have a whole set of discussion around it, but it's very, very critical. The second part that I've found very important, and I learned it in Six Sigma about 20 years ago, the whole idea of 5 whys. So if somebody says, how do you hire people? Let's say that's one question you ask the HR head. The HR head says, this is how we hire. If you ask 5 whys, why do you hire this way? Then he'll break it down to the next level. You ask another why. So why do you, receive resumes this way? Why not this way? Chances are anything that we do in a firm, 99.9%, if you click on 5 whys, you get to the bottom of an issue. One of the reasons why a lot of companies don't do operational excellence very well, they don't solve the root cause. They end up solving as sort of a manifestation of a problem. But as a leader, you have to be very, very good at knowing what the root cause is, because of which a certain problem is happening, or because of which I have to improve a process in a certain way. If you don't know the root cause, you might impacting a wrong change in a wrong place that will have a wrong result on your 4 pillars: revenue, margins, employee sat, and bottom, and customer sat. So asking 5 whys when you are encouraging this ability to rethink your processes or changes becomes extremely critical. So I just wanted to, this comes out of Six Sigma thinking. So any one of you who probably are exposed to it or want to learn more about it, it's a good pointer. You can find a lot of material around it. The second bullet very becomes is a measure everything. If you cannot measure, how would you know? So developing metrics for all your processes, sub processes, and your conjunction points between processes is absolutely critical. So a lot of people just stop at revenues and margins, but you have to go all the way up to revenue per employee, profitability per employee. There are so many metrics that you can come up with for each processes. Now, you don't have to become very sort of fundamentalist about it. To start, you can take 5 or 10 metrics, but as you become a large and a complex organization, you have to have metrics for majority of your processes, majority of your activities, so you can measure it. Because if you can measure it, you can fix it. Very, very important to kind of think about in the starting stages of life. The next part is do a top-down thinking as well as bottom-up thinking, and it's extremely critical, because the right processes or right improvements are the ones where the hypothesis that is laid out is mapped to a data, and the data justifies the whatever improvement you are trying to make. So bottom-up and top-down thinking, you have to have people in your organization or develop that culture, roll out that framework where these things can be sort of mapped to. The next part I've seen is very, very important, and very sort of I advise everybody to follow, is start small but think big. So it's like journey of 1,000 miles. You take one step at a time, but start fast, fail fast. Don't just keep dreaming about things for 6 weeks. It's better to do a thing in 3 hours. If you do it right, adopt it. If you failed it, go back to the drawing board and redo it. And you are seeing that Scrum thinking and software engineering most of these things come from Japanese industrial thinking, but they have been sort of adopted, improved in the software world. And now they are very well adopted and accepted in the process world as well. And I think what we are talking about is a mix of all three. It's a mix of your domain expertise, couple it with the platforms and technologies, couple it with the business processes. So some of these Kanban thinking, short sprints, Scrum, redo, fail fast, start one step at a time, these are coming from software world. 5 whys thinking, start small, think big, they come from the product side of things, from the Japanese. And the consistent and constant focus is once again, comes from Kanban, Japanese. And then the measure is a Six Sigma. But a good mix of these, and there is no what I call a standard cut and paste model that you take from one firm to the other. Every firm is different, because every firm has a culture, a way of doing things, a context, a market, a certain clients. But what you need is leaders who are good at be able to bring this thinking and customize it for your own and build a culture around it. And if you start to think it now, in 2 to 5 years, you will see that at least your top 4 or 5 layers of thinking in leaders, you will be able to develop a DNA where everybody will start to think on these lines. I'll give you an example of Bank of America in 2000 started to adopt some of these things. And in 3 to 4 years, almost every leader who had anybody reporting to him, they were all sort of become very good Six Sigma way of thinking. Why are they doing things? And that was one reason why Bank of America survived the 2008 crisis. Otherwise, they would have gone under, like Wells Fargo is facing an issue, or Washington Mutual, and some of these things. So I would highly recommend that while you are onto it, while we are all talking about it and thinking about it, some of these bullets become extremely critical. And subsequently, Rajkumar and Ashish, whenever you have time, we can have very focused discussions around specifics, but I just want to give you an overall macro framework of thinking about these things. And the last part becomes very storyboarding the journey, break journey into small steps, 5 whys and 5 hows. So, if you are going to say that we are going to be doing industry leading revenue growth, could be a target that your CMD rolls out tomorrow. So what it means, if your competitors and your industry is growing at 10%, you want to grow at 15 to 20%. Now, how would you do it? You need to break down to be able to grow at 20%, how your sales has to change, your relationship management, your marketing, your delivery, every aspect of it. You need to take that and break it down. So your journey becomes that you want to grow, you want to always post industry leading growth by 5 basis points or 10 basis points or whatever. And your journey becomes across all the processes, how are you going to be able to stay ahead of the curve? And then you take that and sort of roll it out into your major horizontal and vertical processes. Sorry, I went about for 10 minutes on this slide, but I thought it was very important. Happy to hear your thoughts and ideas and suggestions. Does it make sense, or is it hitting the bullseye? Let me ask that way.
Sir, I'm Vikas Singh. I have a question.
Yes, sir. Very much appropriate.
Sometimes it happens, sir, that our organization and client goals are different. So how we can align all three to get operational efficiency? Because when the goals are different, I think operational efficiency can't be optimized. So how we can align, sir, when the goals are different of an individual, an organization and client?
Either I'm not getting the question right, or maybe you're not contextualizing it right. Because if you are working with a client, right, as a consultant, your first job is to make the client successful, right?
Right.
And if your job is to make the client successful, then you can't have two separate goals. Your goal becomes his goal, or his goal is your goal. Now, how you deliver on that goal is where your excellence comes in. So, and I'm going to maybe in my own very naive way, sort of give you an example. Let's say a client floats an RFP to build a highway that has to be completed, let's say, in a year. If your competitor says that it's going to take him 3 months to give him the design because he's on manual processes, he's internally inefficient. But if you are internally efficient and you are able to give that design in a month, guess your client goal is your goal and your goal is your client's goal. You can tell your client that forget about a year, you can do this project in 10 months because you are shaving 2 months off the design. Now, the 10 months, the build out could be inefficiencies of the customer and your L&T partner who's laying the highway. But at least in your domain, in your controllable elements, you are 30% or 50, 60% more efficient than the competitor. So I wouldn't agree on that your client goals and your goals are not aligned, because if they are not aligned, there is something wrong somewhere. Client has hired you as a consultant to make him successful. So your goals have to be aligned. Now, where you outdo the competition is by being better than the competition. And so the client will always work with you because you are better than the competition in the marketplace. And if you are that good, chances are then you become an influencer on a client. So once again, to my earlier thought that I was talking about, there are controllables that you control that you can become very good at. And there are controllables that you don't control, but you become influencer on it. So if you are a very efficient firm, you're consistently posting amazing revenue, amazing margins, you will become an influencer on the client and on the competition, whether you like it or not. You become a benchmark. And you become a benchmark because you are better than the competition. You have better client relationships. You are able to deliver what you promise, and you are able to keep your investors happy and your employees happy. So you have to look at story that way. If you think your goals and client goals are not aligned, then you are not looking at the story in the right way, I would say. Just sitting this far and not knowing the overall context. But we can have a call, we can chit chat, and we can double click on it. But that's my thinking.
Sir, I'm Zahur from Srinagar. My question is regarding, you are saying that start fast and fail fast. And at the same time, you are saying we should go step by step.
Yes.
So aren't they in clash with each other?
No, not absolutely not. So what I mean by this, if you have, I used to be in IBM R&D labs before, in the early 90s. That's where I started my life. What happens in the labs, it's called as sandboxing, right? So if you have to build a model and there are no preconceived notion about creativity on what solution you want to, you will come up with 20 ideas. But not all 20 are going to be will go into production. Maybe only 2 will go into production. But how would you eliminate the 18? You would eliminate by trying out whichever one is going to click. And this is a very, very, and I sit in Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley thrives on this idea of start fast and fail fast. And what I mean by that is that if you have 5 ideas, there was a culture in the 90s which came from industrialization and industry culture that unless you have full design, you will not go into production. In the software engineering, the culture came that if you complete the design in a year, by the time you will go into production, it's going to be year 3. Lot of requirements of the client would have changed by then. So what happened in the early stages, in the early 2000s, early 90s and mid 90s, there used to be a lot of large scale software implementations that used to fail. And they used to fail not because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They failed because by the time the product went into production, the context had changed. So the Silicon Valley changed it in a fashion that if you have to build a product, if you have to build a software, you start to roll out one feature at a time rather than trying to develop all the 10 features and then roll out in one package. So let me give you an example. You must be having either iPhone or Samsung. So either you have Apple operating system on it or you probably have Google operating system on it. But every night when you switch off the phone and you turn it off, the software updates itself, right?
Yeah.
You are not waiting for one final version and then buying the phone. That's what I meant by start fast, fail fast. The beauty of that model is, let's say you roll out a feature and the feature didn't hit the bullseye. Since you took a very small journey, you can easily roll back the journey and fix it and roll back again. So your losses are minimized.
Yeah, sure.
Rather
and we have to work out on various options
and
then
taking the sum cost.
Test options.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarity. Thanks.
So if you think about all those things, you will start to what I call, जिसको बोलते हैं ना, इसका आप निचोड़ निकाल लोगे. You will be able to squeeze the thinking behind it and then contextualize for each one of your processes or whatever functions you own it.
Yeah.
But it takes a leader's job is to constantly be a captain of the ship. You have to think 10 miles ahead. So you're standing on the deck, you're looking at 10 miles ahead, and then you are relaying the orders to your first officer, navigate the ship this way or that way. But all these elements have to become an integral part of your thinking. And then you are constantly able to roll out the changes. That's what I meant by that.
Yes, leader has to have the vision. That's why he has to be the leader.
Exactly. Any more thoughts, ideas? Otherwise, I'll move to the next slide. Okay, this is on key starting points. Yeah, the key, here it is just an extension of my previous discussion. So you have to start, if the firm hasn't think about it, you might want to designate a continuous improvement exec at the top of the house. Somebody who has done it before, somebody who has this thinking. Then make a team where a team member from each functional group be part of his team. And that team identifies key metrics for each functional areas, do the baseline measurement of each metrics, set the targets for each metrics, roll out the journey. And then once again, you bring the, start, fail, fast, all those attitudes, even as you are rolling out this thinking. Then let this team work with each functional area to help them to think about top 20 lists. So it's almost like you're changing a culture. And the example I give is like all of us, I'm sure, are married, or at least we know people who are married and who have kids. And all of us who have raised kids, this is almost like you have a toddler who is 7, 8 months old, who is starting to learn how to walk, and how parents help him to learn how to walk. He will fall, he takes baby steps, he will cry, he'll hurt his head. But you have to have a parent at the top of the house who has the same sort of patience and attitude, that you want to teach that kid how to walk, how to inculcate good values, how to be, a better citizen. And then you are hand holding him through his journey as he's sort of moving from kindergarten to first grade and so on and so forth. And just like parents get ready for having a kid and raising the kid, it's a very similar attitude when you are trying to inculcate a very new genetic structure into the organization, or a DNA into the organization. And it starts at the top of the house and then goes one level deep into the leadership, and brings the leadership together and sort of moves them or gravitates them towards this, what I call an attitude of constantly being better, constantly being ahead of the curve, and continuously being a better advisor to the clients and bringing better value proposition. And then, of course, the slide 9, a very simplistic version of all of us who are engineers, and I'm sure 90%, 99% would be engineers on this call. A very simple machine that takes an input, performs a function, and produces an output. The changes that you control is the input to a certain extent, and the operation, the middle piece. And you break it down into very small elements of each and every process, and then you start to make this machine as an efficient machine. And then the output for each functional is going to be different. For HR is going to be different, for sales, for marketing, and so on and so forth. But it's a very granular way of looking at it. What is the smallest grain that you can imbibe this thinking into? Even a person, let's say, who's sitting at the front desk of a firm, how he's using his time, what is he doing, even up to that process level, you can take down this thinking. The next slide is, I kind of, feel it from my heart that it's a journey. It's never a destination. Keep this thing in mind. Never ever have an attitude that I'm done with this and now I'm sitting, operational efficient part is over. My first tip always is leverage technology as heavily as you can, but with a human quotient. Never let the common sense thinking go out of the window, because it's the right amount of technology with the right cultural element and the human quotient that comes together creates the perfect environment. Once you create this team, daily tracking and huddle of the operational efficiency team, even if you do it for 30 minutes or 15 minutes just to take stock of the situation, becomes critical. Just like you see the cricket team when they go out on the field, they do a quick 2-minute huddle, right? It's the whole idea from software engineering, and if you think about even Japanese industrial techniques is used in the same way. I use it with my team, that before we go into a client meeting, I always have my team huddle for 10 minutes over a cup of coffee at a Starbucks or something, just to kind of get everybody on the same page, the cue, who's going to talk when, who's going to deliver what message, how, choreograph, all those things. Very, very critical. Next is track and report progress. Very, very important. Baby step change rollout, extremely critical. Don't roll out one change in a month. Roll out change every few days, but in very small increments. Just like Apple updates your phone software every night and you don't even know, that's how the change should be. Like our babies, they grow one fine day, you think about it's like, oh my God, my son is 10-year-old. Where did the time fly? But he's growing every day at a cellular level. If you can get the change to that sort of efficiency or smartness, that's when you know you have hit the home run. Training and hand-holding across the organization, absolutely critical. So you have to have leaders who are smart at it. They know what they're doing. They can handhold, mentor, fix, change, because it's a cultural change. And the next part is, think 360, not in silos. You have to think of revenues, margins, and SATs across employees and customers while you are changing your organization internally. Your external interaction with the world doesn't have to change. All they need to notice is that you are constantly becoming better. So you have to change internally, while your external interface with the market or external partners, you don't have to force change on them. You just have to become so much better that they constantly gravitate towards you. And that's once again a part of thinking how you roll out in a very small calibrated manner without disrupting the context, without disrupting the industry, but just by becoming better so the industry gravitate towards you. And the last slide is probably just a wrap-up slide. You build an institution that loves and thrives on change. So stop. One of the first things I tell my, whoever I talk to, you should never think of yourself as a company. You should think of yourself as an institution that's going to be a beacon of light for other participants in your context, industry context. Companies should look up to you. And if you develop that attitude, if you live with that attribute in your mindset, automatically all these things start to happen. When you don't want to be second in everything, you want to be a leader, then that attitude shift itself forces all the changes automatically. You develop and encourage culture that loves to play and integrate in new way, where people don't say, "Aare yaar, mere ko ye software kyun seekhna hai yaar, main to phone utha ke baat kar lunga." You want people in the organization that loves to learn new things, that love to read new concepts, that love to look at a problem in a new light. Next part is you stay grounded, you think big, and this is a very, very big thing for me. And I look for leaders who can be as comfortable sitting in a village as they are while sitting in a White House. And the hallmark of a great leader is that no matter which context, no matter what change, no matter what disruption, he is absolutely grounded. And it's very, very critical that you groom leadership within the ranks who bring that sort of attitude to the table. And I think the last three bullets we have talked about is, you take long journey in small steps, you think like a marathoner, you run like a sprinter. And this is a very, very important aspect for successful institutions I have seen. They think 50 years ahead, 100 years ahead, but then they don't miss their quarterly numbers either. So quarterly, staying on top of your monthly and quarterly targets is like a sprint, but they have their eyes on, what the world is going to be in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years itself. And you want to calibrate the leadership's attitude with that sort of mindset. And then, as I say, it's all about leadership across the board, from the very person who's running your cafeteria to your guest houses, all the way up to P&L leaders, the vertical heads and the horizontal heads. Ideas, thoughts, suggestions? I hope I didn't go too fast, but happy to.
I just have 3 points I thought I would share with you after listening to you. Wonderful speech that you gave, and a lot to learn in a 1 or 2 hour period. But yet I would say that the first thing I would say is it is the enthusiasm for work when they come in the morning. That's very important, and the follow up, very important. Yeah. And why I say that is it should be the Honda way. What is Honda way is, in the Honda company, if anybody comes 365 days of the year to work on time and leaves on time, they get a free car at the end without any payment. So the idea behind that Honda thing is, anyway you are coming to work, why don't you come 10 minutes early? What's the big deal? You get your free car, because they cannot stop the operation of the Honda factory. So that's the incentive it gives. And I think it's a great thing from Honda. And the second thing is, people think they are working too much. I just want to emphasize to everybody here listening, we work only 7-12, the US rule, right? 7 months you work, 12 months out of the 12 months. But in India, I find it is 6-12, because there are so many festivals, so many other things. So basically your efficiency is only in that 6 months period of work. I mean, there could be exceptions, that is, I accept it. But yet, the difference between developed countries and here, 7/12 or 6/12, you are somewhere in between that. And the one thing is, 8 hours in a day when they are in the office is a lot of time. A lot of things can be achieved. people seem to forget about it. Yes, you get into some smaller things and other things, but yet 8 hours is a long time where a lot of things can be achieved by anybody. It doesn't matter project manager or a CAD person or anybody else managing it. They can, because you brought up the Japanese thing most of the time in this lecture. Japanese did not have the word leisure after Second World War till 1972. For 25 years, they did not have in their vocabulary leisure. They added it only after 72 when they learned to smile. When they thought they should learn to smile. So with that, I end. So thank you.
Yeah. Great thoughts. But I just wanted to give you a broader framework of thinking. You can double click in any one of these topics and have a subsequent multitude of discussions. But the idea of thinking of operational efficiency as a journey starts at the leadership level, implement granularly, change of culture, make it part of your DNA. That's a big message. And Ashish, Rajkumar, anybody else, any thoughts, ideas, suggestions? And Ashish, I'll send you this deck. You can please
share
with your team.
Yeah, KD Singh बोल रहा हूँ सर.
हाँ बोलिए सर, KD साहब.
सर ये है कि बीइंग ए कंसल्टेंट हम थ्री थिंग्स पे ध्यान दें. जैसे सर ने बोला पैशनेट अबाउट योर रेस्पेक्ट द व्यूअर्स एंड पर्सनली एफिशिएंसी जो है इसे काफी इंप्रूव होएगा.
Yes.
This is Mahmood. What do you think the importance of branding your good work? Of course, we are doing good work. We will be keep on doing good work. But what about branding it adequately to the market?
Yeah, you can think of it. That's one of the outputs of your marketing function, right? So whatever functions you are thinking about, whatever processes you are thinking about, there are inputs to it. You do certain things, there are outputs to it. So you just need to, I think in one of the slides you list down your processes and then you start to think about how you're going to make those processes better. Branding is could be sub-function of one of your marketing processes. All at individuals level, at the team level, at the corporate level.
Okay.
Sir, this is Ravi Shankar from Ranchi.
Yes, sir.
It's a wonderful session. I enjoyed the most. I just want to say two things. For us to take it forward. One thing, probably most of us are very comfortable where we are. I mean, risk, we say, okay, just going a bit of risk, we say, oh, no, let's not go further. Okay, we should probably take risk in our life, probably wherever we are. That will probably, take us to greater things. Point number one. Point number two, though we're sustainable, we should probably move sustainably faster, which is probably a very important thing. Sustainably faster is very important because before somebody else take the probably role, we should probably move there. Sustainably faster is more important for us now.
Yep, absolutely. That's a hallmark of an institution. So you do a process. Second thing you do is, can you make it repeatable? Because it's all about leverage. You don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So you create a process. Can you make it repeatable? If you make it repeatable, can I make it better? Yes. If you can make it better, can you make it sustainable? And once you get onto that ladder, then that now you can start to take this 4-step into every one of your process. You can across your leadership and make it like part of your thinking of the firm constantly. And the whole idea of risk, what you just said, right? The whole definition of risk is at different leadership level is different. But everybody has to think of the risk. And the whole idea of changing things, disrupting things is a risky business, right? So that's where start small, fail fast, come back, refix it. It's all taking a large risk, but breaking it down into small chunks and then addressing the risk at a granular level, one bit at a time. And that's the art and science of becoming constantly better and sustainably faster.
One thing, Manish, you put very relevant points all through your presentation. And one important aspect you touched upon, I'd just like to re-emphasize that, when we are initiating so many things, you need to manage the chaos, right? And we need to there has to be a method to the madness.
Chaos, manage chaos, very important.
Yes. Any more questions?
Yeah, I'm Alok from Jammu. So it was a very nice session. So I think most of us keep on thinking in our minds that what should we do and what we should not do, and don't take any step further. So I think the main thing is that you make a beginning, however small it is. So make a beginning, and then the things will happen. So that is my suggestion.
Yeah, one of the things I said there, you create your top 20 list. And in software engineering, it's very, very important that you can reprioritize the list on daily basis. So let's say you create a top 20 list, there is an item at the top of the list, and you write your constraints and you write your dependencies. Based on how dependencies and constraints are changing, you can reprioritize that list. As long as you're making the movement on those 20 items, and Ashish, to your point, that's what the change, what I call controlled chaos, is all about. As long as you know what's all in your bucket, and you have the ability to reprioritize based on dependencies and the constraints, and let's say you are making the rollout change, you are changing the rollout dates, you are changing things, but as long as you know what's in your bucket, how you are prioritizing, how the constraints are shifting, how the bottlenecks are changing, you will make progress. And don't be perturbed or don't be disturbed if the prioritization has changed. And that's the attitude you want to develop in the team, that I can change the prioritization on daily basis, but none of you have to get upset and get locked onto it. But as long as we are making progress, things are getting rolled out, everybody should be thriving in it. And constant communication and encouragement and the idea of coming together on daily basis, a quick huddle between the team, all those things play a key role in managing the chaos, Ashish, to your point.
Any more questions? We'll take one more question. Okay. So then before we call upon Dr. Kazmi to propose a formal vote of thanks, I would request our CMD to say a few words. Rajkumarji, you're there?
Sorry. Yeah, now it's on.
Yes, sir.
It was an excellent session, and excellent session as well as interactive session, which I value the more, because then you see your leaders are understanding and it is going deep down, so that not only the what the presentation and what the Manish has been talking about with his experience and knowledge, but it has to sink in the organization, which is very, very important. And I was happy that a lot of our mid-level and senior guys interacted and asked questions about, and then only you get the actual feel of what is the real meaning of the subjects that Manish has dwelled upon. The second thing is, I'll again talk about, I have written number of points, and then we can, in the organization, we can further break it upon and then discuss upon number of things we already discussed about how to look at and fix our vision for 2030, as we have this last ELT, which we were talking about. And these things will help us a lot. The training aspect, the leadership aspect, what Manish has dwelled upon very beautifully. And I believe our middle level leaders and the younger leaders who are to tomorrow take the charge of the organization, they are equally equipped today on with such beautiful sessions, and then try to emulate, try to get the learning into their work and then move ahead. Though we still, what KD Singh has also said, lot of maybe others was also saying, lot of our people were saying, We have already, MP Sharma sir also said, a few of the processes but which we had already inculcated in the organization, like this Microsoft Team could be one, which we had already started slightly beforehand, so that today we are in a much better position. We are all equipped across the country, and we are hooked up on this platform. And that is a great thing. Now, one of the guys in the this particular session talked about it. It is now we are feeling better equipped and better connected than what we were doing in the normal working days in the offices. So overall, a fantastic speech by Manish and a lot of learning to be done. And going forward, we'll see further more sessions to come in. Thank you, Manish, from my side. Anybody else has anything or Manish has to say? No. Thanks a lot.
No, I really enjoyed the discussion. It was fantastic here. Anything I can do to help, always there.
Thank you. I now request Dr. Kazmi to propose the vote of thanks.
It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Rodic family, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Mr. Manish Tyagi for gracing this occasion and sharing with us his profound and valuable experience on improving operational efficiency. I express our deep sense of appreciation for Mr. Tyagi for his explanation of operational efficiency in various steps. What is operational efficiency? A sustainable way to create value for a long time. Why should we think and live OE to stay relevant in dynamic world? How to embed in our DNA, develop an attitude for better than yesterday, one step at a time. Think 360 degrees. Outcome, you build an institution. Further, Mr. Tyagi, your dog was reminding you that it is midnight and you have to take a snap or sleep at least. Further, we are grateful to you for demonstrating your in-depth knowledge on the subject. This was an excellent coverage of the topic. It was thought-provoking. We all are inspired. Thank you, Mr. Tyagi, for being with us this morning, your night. It's really great pleasure. You said it is about leadership, attitude to be better and best. Our CMD, Mr. Rajkumar, drives a change in organization and arrange such event to enlighten us. He is visionary and big. He thinks big.
Yep.
We all are really grateful to him. I express our gratitude to him. Such an event requires planning and bird eyes for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues in Rodic who know their job and are result-oriented. Thank you very much, my all colleagues and members of Rodic family for making this event successful with your contributions. We thank you, Mr. Tyagi, again for being with us this morning and your midnight, and it took a lot of pain. We look forward to listening to you again with another inspiring topic.
Yeah, no, it's not a pain. Kazmi Saab, thank you so much for wonderful, kind words. I really appreciate it. It was a privilege. And Rajkumar, thank you so much. Adarsh, thank you so much. And thanks everyone on the call. I hope it was of some value. Adarsh, I'll send you the deck. Please share it with the team. It's all yours. And if there are any subsequent topics or anything, happy to put my thoughts down, Rajkumar and team, and share it with you all. It'll be a pleasure.
And thank your dog also for keeping patience.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Mr. Tyagi.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe and work on your health. Stay fit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Tyagi.